This is Hannibal here from the HannibalTV.com, and today this is going to be a bit of a unique interview, more of a supernatural one with an author and artist and expert in seances that she's been researching for many years now. Shannon Taggard, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm very interested in this subject, and I'd like to know how you actually became interested in it. Was this something you were kind of interested in growing up, or did you have an experience that kind of piqued your interest in the supernatural subject?
Well, I guess like everybody, I was always, love a good ghost story and things like that. But I was not seriously interested in mediumship or the paranormal or spiritualism until I was a teenager. And my cousin got a reading from a medium that ended up telling this true story about how my grandfather died. Well, and through this medium, who was a total stranger, my whole family was shocked that we had heard details we didn't know about my grandfather's death this way. And so I became curious then. And then I became a professional photographer. And I thought I'd spend one summer photographing mediums in a town called Lilydale, which is the world's largest spiritualist community. And it's near where I grew up in Buffalo, New York. So I started going and exploring with my camera, and here I am 20 years later, still interested in pursuing the topic of spiritualism, mediumship, and the paranormal.
What was it that the psychic told you about your grandfather, if it's not too personal, or told the friend that actually was details about how he died?
So the medium came to my cousin and said, "Your grandfather's here, and he is saying he wants you to know he choked to death, and that's how he died." And she thought the woman was crazy and was laughing about it, and went home and asked her parents and my uncle, who was my father's brother, and he said, "No, that's actually true." While my grandfather was dying in the hospital of cancer, but what actually killed him was choking. He choked on food. And so none of us knew that story. And it was kind of, it was kind of touchy, I guess, because he wasn't supposed to be eating food in the hospital. And there was some questions about what happened. And so that's how we found out that that's really actually how he died, was this medium told us.
And as far as this spiritual location where you photographed for a summer, what is so special about it that it has all this kind of spiritual activity?
Well, it's a small town on Cassadaga Lake in upstate New York that's been a it's 1879. And so it's people would spiritualism was a very popular religion. It's an American born religion that came about. It started in 1848, and a lot of the most renowned spiritualists of the day would go to Lilydale, and it was called a spiritualist camp, and it's been in operation since. So over the summer, you can go and take mediumship classes. You can go and get readings. They have message services and healings, and it's been operating like that for such a long time. So that's what makes the place special.
Now, when you were doing photography of that, did you capture anything that was unusual on camera?
Well, when I first began, I was working as a photojournalist, and so I was trying to do a really straightforward story about this quirky place, kind of like a day in the life type of project. And I did start to have some happy accidents with my camera, and it was right around the time where I figured out, like, this is a really hard project to photograph. Like, how do you show the unseen? How do you show invisible experiences? And so there was a couple that happened early on, Like one, I was in a seance situation, and they were passing around a red lamp to hold, and you hold it under your face, and people are supposed to see if they see anything appear. It's called transfiguration. This spiritualists believe that your face can transfigure. So people were trying to do this exercise, and the woman across from me had the flashlight under her face, and everybody in the room was saying, "Oh, I see a second face right next to your face, and it looks like almost exactly like you, but it's not you. Maybe it's your doppelganger. Maybe it's your grandmother. Maybe it's that voodoo priestess Marie Laveau." Everybody was describing this other face next to her, and I didn't see that face. I saw a woman holding a flashlight, and I tried to make a very straightforward photograph of it. But when I got my film back, on the negative was a second face streaming, it like with streams, like right next to her, and it looked exactly like everybody was describing. Now, I know it was a low light situation, and so it was a longer exposure, so the camera, you know, could be motion, right? But it was so ironic that it was absolutely exactly the visual of what people were describing that you couldn't see with your eye. So then I became very interested in playing with the photographic process and seeing what would happen.
And I heard you say in another interview that the actual newer cameras, the electronic digital ones, will capture this kind of activity better than the film cameras, which for whatever reason, your average person would think that the old school cameras might capture it better. But could you tell us a little bit about the difference?
Yeah, people ask me all the time, what kind of camera do you use? Do you think film is better or digital better? Now, I began with usually shooting film, and I actually prefer digital because a lot of times I'm in low light situations, and in the computer, I can draw out a lot more information from the contrast range, meaning I can go into the shadows at very high film speeds and then still open them up. Whereas with negatives, the latitude is a little bit shorter. So I've been really experimenting with that in low light situations. But really, anybody can experiment with photography in these situations. And a lot of my favorite paranormal photographs are from practitioners or people who are just do it for a hobby and they post on Facebook. I try to pay attention and follow a lot of those people who are doing a lot of photography. And so it's got a very DIY spirit, the people in this community, and they're always like playing around with their cameras. Some shoot film, some digital.
Now, for those of us that haven't been part of a seance and have only really seen them in movies, what exactly are they?
So a seance is it's usually when you sit in a darkened room, usually in a circle. There will be a medium who leads the session, and there's a lot of different types or approaches. Sometimes the medium sits in a cabinet, which is like a small little closet type thing that's built with curtains. Other times the medium just gives messages. Sometimes the medium and the people there are trying to get things to move around the room. Spiritualists and mediums today, there's two ways of thinking. Some believe that dark seances are of the past and we don't need to do that kind of thing anymore. So what you often see in a spiritualist church is what you see on the popular TV shows like the Long Island Medium, or I think there's one called the Hollywood Medium now with a young male medium. And that's just like people sitting in a room having a conversation, and the medium is giving messages from dead relatives. But there's other people in spiritualism who say this is a tradition and that you need darkness in order to start certain processes, and that to have certain types of paranormal experiences, you have to be in darkened rooms. So, but there are many different types of seances, and it also depends on the medium. There's no hierarchy, there's no dogma, there's no specific rule book about seances. It's kind of different for each one.
I've heard you talk about ectoplasm before that most of us only know from Ghostbusters, but you were saying that this is a real thing where it's kind of like half in our world, half in the other world, but it's actually a physical manifestation.
Well, ectoplasm has never been proven scientifically, but spiritualists believe that it's a reality. It's a substance. It's kind of like making a psychic body come to life. You know, like it uses the energy of the medium and the people in the room, and it's a linking the two worlds, like the spirit world and our world. It's kind of this link between life and death that becomes physical. So ectoplasm in Ghostbusters, it's very gooey, and you know, there's a scene where it's all over the library cards. That's the first time you see ectoplasm. But in the spiritualist images, it looks like cheesecloth or rope or blankets or cotton. It's a very controversial topic within spiritualism. I mean, the fact that it's a reality. Many people believe ectoplasm is real, but some of the spirit photographs that are shown of it are fake. But it's a spiritualist concept that there's a physical substance that links the two worlds, the afterlife and this life.
I've heard people talk, and this happens in England more than the US, I've heard, where these seances can happen and like a hand will actually appear during a seance. Have you ever experienced anything like that? And what exactly is going on when that happens?
I have experienced a hand coming out in a seance, but it was like completely dark and I could not see what was going on. A lot of people believe that those types of seances are strictly magic shows. Other people believe that that is possible, that ectoplasm can turn into a hand in a darkened room with the right energy and with the right group mind happening. I guess my work, I'm really trying to just question all of this, and also question photography and making things visual in the process. So I will photograph any medium who invites me to photograph them, and I'm not trying to like say that they're real or say that they're fake. I'm just trying to document what's going on and make compelling images.
What was the most realistic, or I guess the most realistic supernatural situation that you've been a part of where you actually believed you were witnessing something that was, there's no way it was normal?
Okay. Oh, this involves a hand. So this connects to the earlier question. So some of the strangest experiences I've had is with a medium named Gordon Garfurth, and he's in England. He and his wife Gaynor have been spiritualists for a long time. They both come from spiritualist families. And when I first met Gordon, he told me, oh, you know, the spirits manipulate my body and I elongate, and my hands change shape and my face changes shape. And initially when he told me this, I was really skeptical that I would ever see anything in his seances, because a lot of people will tell you you're going to see something that you don't end up experiencing. So I went, but he invited me with my camera, and I sat in the front row at the first time I ever attended one of his seances, and there was a red light. And I was maybe 6 feet from him, and Gaynor, his wife, said, okay, now the spirits are going to work with Gordon's hands. And so he put his hand out and he just moved it across, just in front of his body. And as he moved it, I saw his hand go from a regular hand into a gigantic hand. And I screamed. I was so shocked. I screamed, and it's a very bad thing to do in a seance. You're not supposed to do that. You can get in a lot of trouble because it's supposedly you can upset the medium and actually hurt the medium if you bring them out of a trance. But I just couldn't help it. I was so shocked, and everybody else in the room started like screaming too, and I couldn't decide if, okay, are they screaming because I screamed or do they really see this big hand? And I took some pictures, and I was convinced that I had hypnotically rendered the hand through the hypnotic suggestion of being told that the hand would change a shape. And so I just expected a regular sized hand on my camera. But when I downloaded the images, there was this gigantic, grotesque hand similar to what I saw with my eyes. And I don't know if it's, I don't know what happened. To this day, people tell me, oh, oh, that's a glove, or, oh, that's a fake hand. And honestly, it was the most elegant visual I've ever experienced. And Gordon swears it was sincere and that he can elongate and manipulate his body. And, this idea of elongation or manipulation of the body has there's other, Eastern practices, Catholic saints, other people who have claimed such things. I really don't know what happened, but I know that I saw a gigantic hand come out of nowhere, and it was very shocking.
Are you more comfortable with that kind of stuff now? Like if that were to happen again, do you think you would still scream, or are you kind of used to it and understand it better now?
I don't know. I mean, I think now maybe I try my best to keep my cool. But when things are truly shocking, your body responds in certain ways. But I would hope I would be more calm now. But with that, I do have to say, I've never been scared in these types of situations. I should say that spiritualism is very much, the idea around it is about healing and just proving that there's a connection between this world and the next. So they're not doing heavy magic practices or trying to invoke anything that I would find scary. Even though it does sound very dramatic and like it might be scary, I really have never been scared in spiritualist settings. It's more about wonder and surprise and this effort to, penetrate the material world. That's what all of their exercises are to do. So, and I continue to explore, and I'm continuing to photograph. So I'll see what I find next.
What can you tell me about orbs? We always see orbs. That's a very common thing in pictures. Are they more often than not like photo issues, or if they are supernatural, what exactly are they?
Okay, so orbs, there's a lot of, debate about, okay, what's an orb? Is it water? Is it dust? It's just simply, a crummy camera showing an artifact? Now that all of those, I'm a photographer and I understand the technical side very well. So I understand that all of those can factor into things that look like orbs in pictures. But the point of the mission of the orb experimenter would be to interact with the orbs. So when somebody's doing orb photography, they're putting an intention like, okay, if there's a spirit, can you show me orbs? And once they get orbs, then they say, okay, if you're really here, they'll put out their hand like that and try to take a picture with the orb perfectly in their hand, or fill up the room with orbs. So a lot of times you'll see that technique is sometimes called orb calling, where they'll go into a room and take a picture, and there'll be one orb maybe, and then the room will fill up with orbs. So it's really a consciousness exercise to try to interact with the visual orbs, like when you're using photography. So that's really what it's about. There's a lot of literature and books about orbs. There's even some physicists, and I'm drawing a blank on their name right now, but that husband and wife physicists, and they claim to have gotten orbs in clean rooms. So yeah, there's like a lot of debate about what orbs exactly are, but I think the most important point is that it's about trying to interact with the consciousness on this plane, bringing these planes together.
Now, I was very close with my grandmother who passed away last year, and I will show you some pictures here. Her last name was Greenwell, and at her funeral, there was some green orbs around only me,
Wow.
around her casket. Do you think that could possibly be some type of message, or is that just a reflection?
Well, what's interesting about those three is they all look different. Like different types. Like one almost looks like a stream. Could it be lens flare? Could it be something? Yes, but also, isn't it? I find it wondrous and strange and synchronistic that happened to you at your grandmother's funeral, and they were green, and you got three of them. Like, so I guess what I'm saying is photography, even in things that are not paranormal, it's a very tricky thing to use as evidence. It's a very malleable medium. But I believe stuff like that can be testimony, or can back up feelings, or can be something sublime that happens that you can't explain. So I think it's beautiful that you got those green orbs.
Yes, and that brings me to one of the fan questions. Someone asked earlier, in your opinion, is there like a heaven or hell? Because we always hear about this. Then we also hear about ghosts and poltergeists. And then we hear other stories about people passing away and actually witnessing people crying over their bodies after. And then there's the question, do animals have an afterlife too? So it's just so many questions, and I know you don't have the right answer, but maybe you could share your theory. Not necessarily the right, but like the answer
Yeah.
everyone's looking for. But maybe you could tell us your theory.
Okay, so I don't have any exact answers, and I always tell people, if somebody tells you they have all the answers, maybe don't totally trust anybody who claims to have all the answers, because sometimes that can go really wrong. But what I find fascinating is these stories, these phenomena, like you find them throughout history, throughout every culture, throughout every era. And a lot of the stories or the phenomena is described similarly. And, in Lilydale, I often meet people who will say things like, believe me, I never thought in a million years I'd be at a place like this, but I saw my father's soul leave his body, or I had this experience, or I saw a spirit, or I got a message from a spirit that that shocked me, or they have a reading with a medium that is so absolutely beyond compelling that they can't deny that there's something to it. So, addressing the question of heaven and hell, spiritualism became very popular in the late 1800s because it rejected this idea that unbaptized children had to go to purgatory, or that there was hell. It was kind of like a progressive stance against the black and white heaven or hell of Christianity. And so that's part of what brought spiritualism into the popular culture, because it said that the afterlife in heaven was for all of us, and it kind of like negated a hell. But there's a lot of Christian spiritualists as well. So like I said, when you believe in spiritualism, there's no dogma. So you can actually be a Christian and a spiritualist, or a Buddhist and a spiritualist, or other faiths even also. So I'm not, I guess, does that answer fully
Yeah.
enough?
And there is proof of reincarnation too. So I guess it's a mystery that maybe one day we'll know before we pass on, or most likely not. Somebody wants to know, Matt is asking if it's true spirits can attach to a doll.
So in certain magic practices that is believed, and I mean, even, the ancient use of statues was to attach spirits to certain statues, and that's like why the noses are broken off sometimes, because they try to put a spirit in the statue and break off the nose. I'm not an expert. All I could say is that there's some practices that do believe that. In spiritualism, it's they're more interested in communicating with intelligence, which means, I guess that would be the difference between a spirit and a ghost. So a lot of times in paranormal or haunted situations, something that would attach to a place or a doll might be considered a ghost, which would be a low level energy that some spiritualists describe more as like a time trace, or an energy that's trapped and not the intelligence of an actual spirit. I don't know if that helps.
Carlos wants to know, in your opinion, do you think we would be with our pets in the afterlife, considering if we go to an afterlife after death? Do you think it's possible to see pets again, or do you think there's nothing for animals?
Yes, I think it's definitely possible. And I've seen many messages that people have gotten from mediums from their pets. And it actually, this summer, I went to a message service and I was sitting next to my friend, and she got a message from a medium, and it was describing her childhood dog. And the dog was actually giving her a message about her life, the spirit of the dog, through this medium. And then as she was giving the message, we heard a dog barked really loudly outside the window, and we all laughed. And the medium said, "See, he's really here." So I've seen a lot of message work with animals, and spiritualists, there's a very strong interest in animals and animal communication and animal spirits.
Mike would like to know if you think it makes a difference if you're cremated or buried as far as what happens, or is the spirit left the body by then and it doesn't matter?
Yeah, I know that that spiritualists believe that spirits are not in the graveyard. So like you said, it's our shell that we shed and our spirit goes on. And so death is not the end, it's just a transition. So that what you do with the body does not matter. Now, in Christianity, they have different views of the body, but even in Christianity and Catholicism, you are allowed to be cremated and buried in a Catholic cemetery. I know that for sure from family. So I think it's okay either way.
John wants to know if suicide affects what happens when people pass on. You do hear sometimes about ghosts from people that have committed suicide.
Yeah, there's a lot of different theories about people not being able to get to the light if they leave the world tragically. And there are mediums who specialize in crossing over work, where they try to help those spirits, or some mediums say that they just, that's their specialty, that they can see those spirits and they can help them get to the light. One of my favorite stories that I actually include this story in the book. There was a medium in Lilydale named Betty Schultz, and the town historian was Joyce LaJudas. And they used to tell me the stories about being spiritualists and living in Lilydale. And they said they used to go to Gettysburg a lot on road trips with each other because it wasn't far from Lilydale. It was like a day-long road trip. And one time they were on the battlefield land and they saw a spirit of a soldier. And they were like, he doesn't know he's dead. And they said, hey, buddy, come with us. And they put the spirit in the car and brought him to Lilydale and took him to the lake and brought his spirit to the water and then led him to the light. And when they told it was a very funny story, and they told it with great humor, but they also swore to me that it was a true story and that it was sincere and it was something they did for this lost spirit of a soldier. So
I've heard Gettysburg is one of the most haunted places in America. Is that true?
Yes, supposedly, but I also heard from people who live there then that a lot of the tourism and the commercialism of that idea kind of, messed with the ambiance. So a lot of people don't believe it really is that haunted, that it's just, and maybe they believe it was more so before it got all the attention. So I don't know. I mean, I have been to Gettysburg once, and you definitely feel history. I did not have a paranormal experience there, but it was very eerie being on the battlefields. And I took a tour and I learned a lot of the stories and the supposed stories of, meaning like reported stories of paranormal experience, but also the stories of what happened on the land.
Now, I heard you say in the Mystery Wire interview that you did that there is some connection with UFOs and aliens and this type of activity. Could you elaborate on that? Because you didn't really go into detail in that interview.
Okay. Yes. So I think it's common to think that mediumship and spiritualism is a separate thing, and UFOs are a separate thing, and fairies and elemental beings are a separate thing. But really, or Bigfoot's a separate thing. But really, if you study the paranormal or with a sort of an anthropological lens, or like through just trying to take a look back, you'll see that all of these things kind of intersect and cross over. And many of the mediums I know have also had UFO experiences. Some mediums I have met channel aliens. The most famous alien abductee in the world, Whitley Strieber, has recently written a book about his communications with his deceased wife, Anne. And he also says that in some of his abduction experiences, he has also seen spirits of the dead with the aliens. So there's a lot of crossover with all of this stuff. So the paranormal is one big box. It's not, it's really something that's hard to pull apart, into distinctive things, because these experiences kind of end up overlapping.
Have you done much UFO research yourself?
I often say I follow a bit, but the UFO thing it's such a hot, how do I put it? Like, it's just so loaded. I think it's the area of the paranormal that's the hardest to study, the hardest to get real information. There's a lot of really, trickster aspects to UFO. All of the paranormal there is, I believe that there's a lot of trickster things going on. But the UFO, I just see that as the most potent area of the paranormal. So it's not my specialty.
This is kind of a troll, but it's a bit funny, so I'll read it anyways. He says, God and his spirit only. The Bible reveals that psychic experiences are real but demonic, and that deceiving spirits are counterfeits for the true spirit of God. What do you think about that type of stuff?
Well, with all due respect, I understand why people are warned about the paranormal or these types of practices. They're not for everybody. You can really, some people are just not meant to be mediums or even see mediumship or have these type of experiences. It can be unsettling because you are really bringing different aspects of your mind into different places. I mean, there's a real true chaotic nature to some of these experiences. But that said, many of the world's most famous mystics, the saints, have had these experiences. And the more we, and these experiences happen to regular people too. And so the more you repress something, I think the worse you make it sometimes. Are all these experiences negative? No. I mean, if you want to classify it all as demonic or put it in that box, you can, but I think that's overly simplistic. And I think the idea of a valuable darkness is something that maybe we should consider. Are all things dark negative or demonic? I mean, dark also means hidden or mysterious or unformed. I do think there's something very deeply tied to the creative process and the paranormal and the creation itself. If you just look at musicians, who, they'll do a lot of drugs and go into different headspaces and bring back this crazy potent music. I mean, that would be one example. So I do understand, though, that some people do experience negativity. Like one of the things I could say, like people who have night terrors, many of those people believe they're absolutely encountering something demonic. But, there's a lot. Yes, there's a danger to the paranormal, but it's also many things in the world are dangerous. It doesn't mean we shouldn't acknowledge it or study it or, acknowledge that it exists.
We always hear that Ouija boards are dangerous and don't touch those, you're inviting demons and so forth. What's your opinion on that, and why would a seance be safer than using a Ouija board?
Okay, so a spiritualist might answer that as first, that intention is everything. So if you go and use a Ouija board and you expect something like a negative force or something dark to come through it, that's what you'll get, and that is partially created with your mind or fully created with your mind. Spiritualism, the Ouija board was invented by spiritualists because they used to communicate with coded rapping. But now spiritualism has really distanced itself from the Ouija board because of that folklore and because of those kind of reports of the negative experiences. A very developed medium would say you don't need the Ouija board, that you can do it yourself. Some mediums do use boards, but just with intentions for the highest and the best things. Supposedly the folklore is that you bring in lower energy through a Ouija board. But, I guess a spiritualist would say it's all about intention and the person using the board.
And you mentioned earlier about musicians sometimes taking drugs and stuff to get into the creativity zone. Do you think that taking drugs like mushrooms or LSD could actually benefit people that are trying to communicate with the dead, or would that just be a hallucination?
I'm not an expert on psychedelics, but I have heard it described as similar to near-death experiences that people report, or that you very much feel that you have died and or see spirits of the dead, or feel like it's a death and a rebirth of sorts. So yes, I do think there's a connection. And also, the shamans in South America, they use the ayahuasca as to use this substance to invoke a dramatic healing experience. It's all about healing. I do also think that you have to be careful, and LSD and mushrooms are not for everybody. Some people do have bad experiences, but for the most, a lot of people have healing experiences and profound healing experiences.
Someone wants to know, Rick, if you've ever been in a seance where you've had experience speaking to the dead that are in limbo, or whoever was leading the seance did.
In one, there somebody did. It was a circle where everybody was welcome to bring through whatever they were getting psychically or mediumistically. And one woman did find a lost soul, and the whole group got together and tried to help her lead the soul she was interacting with to the light. Now, whether this actually happened, I don't know, because I couldn't tell you because I was not sensing it. But the woman who did the work very much believed that she did help the soul get to the other side.
There's been a few people that have wanted to ask about James Randi, who I guess was a skeptic and magician. Are you aware of his work?
Yeah. Yeah, I know James Randi is a hero to a lot of people, but he also has a really sketchy history personally himself that, I won't get into, but you can look into it. And so I don't know. I mean, I think Randy had like a real personal vendetta against anything considered paranormal. I don't think anybody could have ever won that award no matter what. But I also do think there are people who do fraud, and that sometimes even real true mediums do things that are duplicitous. They call that mixed mediumship. And the history of magic tricks and mediumship is very much intertwined, and it's very complicated. I mean, a lot of showbiz acts, like the most famous magic act that's on stage that has ever happened, or like one of the most famous throughout magic history, is the Spirit Cabinet, which was started by the mediums, the Davenports, who were both mediums and magicians. So it is very complicated, and there is a sketchy history of the intertwining between fraud and the paranormal. So it's not that I don't think people should be skeptical, but I also think James Randi was was also a fraud in certain ways himself.
Now, I've heard that the best hour to make contact is around 3 a.m. Do you think it matters what time, or in your opinion, is there specific hours where this type of activity can be more prevalent?
I don't know. I mean, I guess the night is a different energy. So, and usually most seances happen at night. 3 a.m., I don't know. I mean, I guess, yes, there's something to be said about, I guess 3 a.m. would be right at the time where the night is leaving and the early morning is going to come in. So you're maybe that's the most liminal time in the evening, and liminal spaces are always, the space between opposites, the middle of two opposites is the liminal. And people say that, or there's theories that anything liminal brings about more paranormal. So yeah, I would say it probably is an interesting time to do a paranormal investigation.
Now, can you tell us about your book that you have out and what exactly you cover in this book? And I know it involves some of your pictures as well. I think you have some more artistic pictures from what I've seen on your website. And then you also have pictures that are from actual seances. Is that right?
Yes. So some of the pictures from my book are on my website, which is just my name, shannontaggard.com. My book is currently out of print. Unfortunately, I'm really hoping that I will get it back in print. But if anybody is in the Baltimore area, I currently have an exhibition of the work up at the University of Maryland in Baltimore County. And I'm going to be there on October 14th doing an artist talk that will be live streamed. So if you want info or to see that talk, you can just stream it. The link is at my website. I also have a mailing list that you can get all this information, because the book is out of print, but I'm hoping to get it back in print. And there's other ways to see parts of the work through my talks. Actually, on my homepage of my website too, there is a link to a long talk I did about my work.
Now, we already covered this, and maybe this person didn't quite understand it, but someone's asking, if your brain dies, how does your memory live on? And basically, according to a lot of the research that I've done, and you seem to have done similar research, that, as you said, the body in theory is just a vessel, and your brain is just something that the spirit is occupying while it's here on Earth. And when you pass away, the spirit goes on. We don't exactly know what happens. Some of these seances seem to be able to contact some of these spirits, but could you explain that to people that might not understand it, as far as what this gentleman is asking about the brain dying?
Well, I mean, it might be interesting for this person to read about the near-death experience literature, because a lot of those cases, the people will be clinically dead for long periods of time, and they will report experiences of, seeing the room and seeing actual details and kind of taking in the experience while their brain is actually dead. So I guess it's about, like, your consciousness lives in your brain, it animates your brain and your body, but it doesn't need it to go on, or the consciousness embeds in us, but it's not contained in us.
Well, you have some fans on here already. You have someone asking if you're married.
I am married.
What does your husband believe in this? Is he interested in this subject as well?
Yeah, he's really open-minded. He's a good sport about everything, and he goes along with me to a lot of the trips I take, or a lot of my travels. He'll go along with. He's kind of agnostic about it and open to it, and has been in a lot of the places that I've taken pictures at, and he's had a lot of interesting experiences, and a lot of my friends are mediums, and so they're his friends too.
What do you think about Gary Spivey, the psychic from the 90s? He was really popular.
I don't know.
Big hair, like.
I don't know who he is.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. I'm surprised that I don't, but I'll look him up.
Yeah, because somebody did an interview with him recently, and we put it on this channel. Because he did some stuff in wrestling as well, and we cover wrestling on this channel.
Oh, fascinating.
But he didn't seem as legitimate, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I'll look into him. Thank you.
And as far as where fans can follow you or look up your research more to find out more information, how can they do that?
So I am active on Instagram, and my Instagram account is at Séance_book. I do have a Twitter, but I'm not really on that much, but that's the same handle, at Séance_book. My website, shannontaggard.com, has all of this information, and also my mailing list where I put out things. I also have a list of events. Every summer I host a symposium in Lilydale, where I get people to talk about academics or researchers or historians talk about paranormal topics. It's a lot of fun. That old schedule is up, but that's usually the last weekend of July, every July in Lilydale, New York. And yeah, that's all. It's all at my site.
Well, I hope the Canadian border is open as far as driving by next July. Maybe I'll stop by, but right now we have to fly.
Oh, I know. Well, you should if you can. Yeah, because where are you in Canada? Where are you located?
I'm only 45 minutes from Ogdensburg, New York. So
Oh,
not
okay,
too far.
great. Okay, yeah, you should definitely. I think you'll find Lilydale a really interesting place.
I think so too. By the way, this is Gary.
Oh, God. Oh my God, I have to know about this man. Oh my God, I'm totally gonna research this guy.
Someone is asking what you think about Houdini's research into seances, which I've actually heard about that as well.
I think Houdini's research, I think it's very interesting. I think Houdini did some good, ghost busting in his day, but unfortunately, the stereotype is that Houdini disproved mediumship and all this stuff, and that really wasn't the case. He specifically, if you want to get into, there's a great book called The Witch of Lime Street, and it's about a medium named Marjorie the Medium, and it talks about Houdini and her investigators, and what happened was Houdini did kind of set her up because he couldn't truly bust her. So there are accounts of Houdini being a little sketchy with the medium he couldn't actually bust. He had supposedly had his former assistant stated that he had him plant things in her box. He built this box for this woman named Marjorie, and she could still do her mediumship in it, and it frustrated Houdini to no end. But Houdini's a fascinating man, and his involvement with spiritualism is also fascinating. And I do think he was misled and had he was really heartbroken by his friend Arthur Conan Doyle when his wife supposedly brought through his mother, and he felt that it was not true, that it was actual fake mediumship.
Have you ever heard of Walter Mercado, the Latino medium?
Well, oh, is he the one that they did the Netflix documentary on?
Probably.
Walter Mercado. I thought he was absolutely fascinating. I would love to experience a reading with him. I know he's deceased now, but if it's that person that I'm thinking of, that documentary was totally amazing.
And last fan question I'll ask for today. Thanks for everyone for joining in. John wants to know who your favorite musicians are.
Oh gosh, that's a hard one. Wow. Well, my favorite musicians. Well, I love like classic rock, and I actually love reading the biographies of all the big rock stars because you'll find a lot of paranormal experiences or paranormal overlaps. I just bought a big documentary about John Lennon, and I actually, my friend did a documentary, and I was in her documentary, and there was also a medium or psychic named Frank Andrews who was in it, who supposedly told Yoko Ono that John Lennon was going to die. He predicted that, this psychic, but like, I love reading about, like, David Bowie, for example, was really into Kirlian photography when he was in his cocaine phase. So I love rock music, but I also like reading about the lives of the rock musicians and seeing where it overlaps with the paranormal.
And by the way, I looked up Walter Mercado.
Yes,
and
yes.
It is the Netflix guy.
Yes. Oh my God. He seemed like an amazing, beautiful, fascinating person.
Yeah, I'm going to have to watch that. I hadn't heard of it until now. It sounds interesting.
Yeah, it's really good.
Well, this has been very interesting. Thank you for your time and filling us in. And I encourage everyone to follow her and stay in touch with her journey. And I'll let you close this up with whatever you want to say. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me. And I guess I just want to mention that I am working on a new book, but it's a book of archival seance images from a group that was active for 50 years in Missouri. And I think it's going to be a really fascinating book. And so maybe you'll have me back when that book's ready and I can talk about that. It's called the SORAT group.
Oh, for sure. I definitely will. So thanks a lot. And I'm sure all the fans appreciate it too.
Okay. Thank you. I had a fun time. Thanks.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it and click the subscribe button.